Okay, most people are getting their seats now. So for this evening's exciting talk, usually try and make it relative to ordinary daily events and how we can understand them in terms of Buddhism, real Buddhist practice. And there's two things which happened in the last week. And one, I got an email from somebody, a study from Brown University, about the dangers of meditation, the downside of mindfulness practice. And also at the same time, you all know a couple of days ago there was a terrorist attack in Manchester. Now I'm going to connect the two together. So this is interesting. How can you actually do this? But, you start off with some of the Buddhist ideals. Why is it that Buddhists don't have terrorists? Are we missing out on modern life? And the answer, to start off the answer, this little quote which I cut out from a newspaper a long time ago, which I read out at Parliament House. We had a Wesak celebration in Federal Parliament on the 10th of May, and I read this out to the Pollies. There wasn't many there, but Richard Di Natale was there from the Greens, and so nice to see him there for celebrating Wesak Day in Federal Parliament in Canberra. Anyway, this is what I read out. It's a cutout from letters to the editor of the Sydney Morning Herald. I don't know about the Christians and Muslims, but I am greatly concerned about those Buddhists. It is simply un-Australian, the manner in which they are so kind, gentle and tolerant, never seeking headlines or whinging about how they are treated. Can this be quickly addressed before it spreads? There's a lovely bit of satire there, but I was very pleased to get this because it just showed Buddhist practice, as understood by many people, as has been practiced for years. There are always a bit exceptions, but those are people who stray away from what we understand as the Dhamma, as Buddhism. It's always been very calm and tolerant and peaceful. Why? And one of the reasons is that we do have our practices of meditation, the real ones, when we sort of don't get sidetracked, and that one is very much being aware of what's going on, especially in our emotional world and our physical body. And once you become aware of what's happening in your body and mind, then you have access to the holy scriptures of Buddhism, which are never written in a book, but to be found out inside your own heart and mind. What feels correct and what feels obviously wrong. An example of that came up just when I was in Melbourne. I had to go travelling. My previous trip was to Melbourne, the Buddhist Society of Victoria, to help celebrate their Wesak. And there was a question came up, it was a Sri Lankan mother who was concerned about some of the criticism her daughter was receiving. Her daughter was a very fine woman who had studied well, a very competent young lady who finished a medical degree and was a practicing doctor, and eventually ended up as one of the only 3 people in Australia, so I was told, who can perform legally late-term abortions. Late-term ones, not early ones. And some people were calling her a killer, a murderer. And the work she was doing was Was she a murderer? Late-term abortions? Killing living beings, isn't that against our precepts as a Buddhist? This is not the early-term abortions, it's late-term, almost fully formed little beings inside the mother's womb. But the type of abortions that she was performing, she gave one example. What she had to do the week before was a 10-year-old girl who'd been raped and became pregnant. And many other people who've been victims of sexual abuse at such a young age. And she was one of the 3 people who were approved legally to perform such abortions in some extreme cases. Yes, it was killing. It's against our precepts. So it says in the books. But I said, as they asked me for some advice, Ajahn Brahm, help. People respect you, and especially in the Buddhist world. So I said to them, well look, how I make my decisions a lot. Yeah, the books are important, but in the end you're mindful enough, really aware, to actually find out how it feels in the heart. Does that seem to be wrong to you? If you were in that position, what would you do? And I said that doesn't seem to be anything wrong there at all. It's a very unfortunate situation that's actually got to that place, but that's the reality. This is where we're at. And so it feels the compassionate, the wise, the proper thing to do, certainly in that situation. And I use that as an example in exactly how we make decisions in life, how we have this morality, where the ethics actually come from. But it's against the precepts, people say. Yes, precepts are very important. They are what I call traffic lights. And traffic lights means that when it goes red, you have to stop. Most times. But if it happened that this evening I had a heart attack, and you put me in your car and took me to the hospital, please go through the red traffic lights. Save my life. But what would you do if you had someone had a heart attack in the back of your car? Oh, come up to a red traffic light. You wouldn't just go straight through immediately. You would say, this is danger. That's what red means, danger. It's not saying no. It says dangerous. So you would stop, have a look around, and if it was clear, you think it was safe, you go through. Now that is what precepts are. That is what rules are. There is always those exceptions. Those precepts are there not to forbidden, if you go across that you'll get executed. Those precepts are there to make you really aware this is an incredibly dangerous place to be. But the final decision comes from something much more, something much deeper than a precept. That is where, especially if you have developed your own meditation practice, it comes from that deep intuition. But that deep intuition has to be checked. There's something which I was very inspired of when I first came across Buddhism. Yes, that intuition is there, but that intuition, that feeling inside, can be wrong if it's being infected, perverted, being controlled by one of 4 things. And this is where the Buddha's words called it for agati, A-G-A-T-I. I haven't found a better word for that than the old Pali word for it, agati. If you are coming from personal desire, what's in it for me? If you're coming from anger, ill will, if you're coming from stupidity, or if you're coming from fear, then don't trust that intuition, because it's being perverted. You can't really trust it if it's what I want, personal interest. Or if you ever have any anger or ill will, that will actually just show you what you want to see rather than what really needs to be done. Obviously, stupidity, when you haven't got the full picture, you don't really know what's going on. You haven't got the full message, so have to know what's possible, what the situation is. And lastly, and most importantly, you should never ever act out of fear. Fear so often makes you make wrong decisions. So the decision stands by itself. It's not what other people are going to say about you, even what the consequences are going to be for you. You make that decision and make it without fear. Personal example, I love telling this story because it's probably one of the most difficult decisions which I have ever made, but it was the one which I'm most proud of, the way I did it. And of course, all these things are controversial. You may think it should have gone the other way, but I stand by this, and many of our Buddhist society people are very happy I did this. And I know Dennis over there was actually there when I made that decision. And that was when I was in Thailand after doing the ordination of bhikkhunis, of nuns, and facing all of my friends who said, we're going to kick you out of our group. We're going to expel you. And these were my friends I'd grown up with. This is my heritage. But you can stay if you say that that bhikkhuni ordination was wrong. And those ladies which you now go and visit at Santi Monastery, Ayaniroda, Venahasapanya over in Dhammasara, or Venerable Niroda, Venerable Ajahn Vayama over in Patachara. If you say that those aren't real nuns, then all is forgiven. And of course there was a lot of pressure on you. And I knew that if I made a decision one way, that my life would be very easy. If I made another decision, it would be very difficult. It was for many years. And I remember that decision so clearly. You know, that you had to stop and really be aware, be mindful. What was the right thing to do? You couldn't trust your logic. You never can. What I did was to make sure, is there anything in this for me? Am I afraid of anything? Do I really know what's going to happen? I checked those 4, what they call agatis, before I made my decision. And the decision was so clear. Don't be afraid. It doesn't matter how much you have to sacrifice. Those are bhikkhunis. They are bhikkhunis. Bye-bye, what papa. And you know, these days, I look back upon that and I say, well done, you were a monk, you did the right thing in those decisions. You did follow your heart, what was right inside. And that's how I made it. You look inside, what's the right thing to do? And to me, that will always be my moral compass. Intuition, yes, but checking out these 4 things which could swing the intuition into just the wrong way. What's in it for me, or my own personal benefits, or anger, ill will, I'm doing this just to spite somebody, or stupidity, delusion, and lastly, from fear. Never follow those. And that means your intuition becomes very trustworthy. Just like the answer which I gave to that mother who was really caring for her daughter who was doing such difficult work, but helping people, big time. So that means that we actually feel inside what's right and what's wrong. Now, what does that do with terrorism? First of all, to be able to harm and hurt another human being, just like terrorists do. What are they doing? What's going through their minds at the time? It's actually believing, what they're told, even what they take to be their precepts or their rules or what they think is right, instead of actually following what's going on in your own heart. If a person did practice such awareness and did know the wisdom of actually feeling what's right and what's wrong, you could never actually do that. I did read a book once about an army, how they train people in an army. And there was a general who wrote this book, and he said, historically, one of the most difficult things which they've ever had to do is actually to get the soldier to pull the trigger when they're face to face with somebody else. And the historical research which they did, which was from a top general, I think in UK, was pretty accurate, that even if it's him or me, it's if I don't pull the trigger, I'm going to die. Many soldiers apparently don't pull the trigger. They just can't do it. It just cannot be done. They feel it in their heart. And I also recall a story which, it was something which I could relate to very much, because I grew up in a time where there was the Vietnam War occurring. And I remember at the time just being concerned, trying to protest against it. I didn't agree with it. Even as a young man, I didn't really know too much about what was going on, but it didn't feel right. But I also remember an incident which was one of the worst atrocities in that war, which was the My Lai massacre. And I still remember the people involved, Lieutenant Calley. And he was told, and he ordered his troops to follow these orders, to go into the village of My Lai in Vietnam and kill every man, woman and child. The whole lot, indiscriminately. That was the order. And apparently some journalist, some TV program did a documentary, I think 30 years or 40 years afterwards, to find out what the results were of the soldiers who actually went in to that village to kill men, women and children. And what was fascinating, I never saw that documentary, but this was reported to me, that all those soldiers who followed the orders, who did what they were told, had huge emotional and social problems. Can't keep a relationship together, drug abuse, psychological disorders, never really being happy and well. But as always, there's exceptions, which actually, that's where it gets very interesting. That's where we can find out what solutions can there be to this. And this was a black African soldier who, when he was ordered to go into this village and shoot and kill, refused. He said, "No, I can't do this." Even though he was disobeying an order during a war, he knew exactly what the consequences would be. Court-martialed, sent to military jail for 4 or 5 years. But he was willing to take that. And the interview was, how could you make that decision? You knew what the consequences would be. And military jail in US is worse than ordinary jails, which are just make jails in Australia look like holiday camps. So these are really tough jails to go through. And he's willing to do that. And they asked him, how could you make that decision when you knew the consequences? And are you religious? He wasn't religious at all. He was just from some really poor part of the United States who joined the US Army just to get a life, to get ahead. Otherwise it was just crime and drugs. That was his only future. So he used that as a way out of poverty and get some self-respect. But he said, I wasn't highly educated, I wasn't religious. I just knew it was wrong. And when I heard that tale, I hope I got it correctly, I said, how much time is it that our education, our religion, stop us being as wise as that African American soldier? Because he didn't have a religion and education, he could actually feel it. It wasn't blocked by what he was told and what he believed. One of the sayings which I really try and live by, never allow your learning to stand in the way of truth. Never allow your knowledge to block truth, because that can sometimes happen. And so this fellow didn't have much knowledge or beliefs, except he had his own innate wisdom, which is there in just about everybody when religion can get out of the way. And I'm saying this as a religious leader, which means we can feel, we can know our heart, what's right and what's wrong. And he said, I just couldn't do it, it was wrong. I just can't do that. Don't care about the consequences, it's wrong. He suffered 4 or 5 years in military jail in the United States, but now he was the only person apparently who was happy with himself, had a good relationship, wasn't addicted to stuff, felt good about himself. He stood up for what he knew was right, and now he's getting the good karmic results of that. Now this is what I mean about if we can look at what religions actually say, not just the words, but the meaning behind it, to teach us to be aware, to teach us to know what's really going on. And then I don't think you could ever blow up anybody. You couldn't pull that gun. It's just not right. Why can't a person see that and feel that? Again, it's because one is blinded. Now, what's that got to do with some of the problems people have in meditation? A lot of times it's because we teach too much of what you're supposed to do, rather than you feeling your way into meditation. You know that sometimes when you meditate and people say, sit up straight, it doesn't feel right. You've got a bad back. Sit on the floor. You can't do that. Your knees are exploding in pain. But how often, when it gets to experts, especially religious experts, do we just follow them? We follow the outside leader instead of following the inside wisdom. That is a problem. What religion should be doing, what psychology should be doing, is not making you more dependent on external authorities, but actually making you independent. I am terrible on that. I'm a big failure because you keep coming back week after week, year after year. I am trying to get rid of you, honestly, so you can find out your own wisdom. That's how I had to do it. So now you find out your own wisdom. Stop coming and depending on me. I want to retire, 65 already, and getting older every day, obviously. But now you feel what is right, what is wrong, instead of believing what a religion or a book says. And that actually is Buddhism. That's what they said, the Kalama Sutta. Don't believe what it says in books. Don't believe in traditions. Don't believe just because it's said by a wise man or a wise woman. Just you follow your own heart. That's what we're supposed to be doing, empowering people. Not telling them what to believe or what to do, but empowering you so you know for yourself. And if we could have that empowerment of people, to actually to know, to feel, it would be impossible that we could do harm to another person. I can't see. This was maybe because I was very fortunate where I was born and how I was brought up, maybe past lives. It took me a long time, honestly, to get my head around sort of child abuse. How could a person do that? I couldn't embrace that and find out why. Because you get a little kid there, how can you hurt anybody? If you really follow your heart, this is wrong, it can't be done, just like the Afro-American soldier. This is wrong to kill, this is wrong to harm. You don't need precepts to tell you that. You don't need to be told in a big book that that is wrong. You feel it. And it's just, that is where the great insights and moral code come from. And for meditation as well. How often do we follow teachers and say, oh, this is the right way of meditating, instead of actually feeling it for ourselves? I could never understand. I did this, I tried it, but I couldn't understand when the Zen master would come right behind you with a stick and hit you on the back. That made no sense to me. Well, this is supposed to be Buddhism. What are you doing that for? It's hurting people. Oh, it's out of kindness. Yeah? So it made no sense. It never felt right. It felt painful. Actually, I never got hit, but I always tell the story. I went to this Zen monastery, because I was in UK in 1972 or something, and there wasn't that many monasteries around. There wasn't any place to meditate. Temples were few and far between, so you just went to the nearest one, which was remotely Buddhist. So I went to this place for a weekend retreat, and it was really cold, and we had to sort of sit down facing the wall, so we didn't know who was walking behind us. But you did see the peak, and this big monk with a Zen stick came right behind you. And if you were sleepy, you started nodding, you get hit. But I never got hit. Never got hit. I've always been a monk with good karma. I'm a lucky monk. That's why I came to Perth. Very lucky coming here. So anyway, I was lucky and fortunate, good karma, because the man sitting next to me was more sleepy than I was. So he got hit first. Whack! And as soon as I heard that, I was perfectly straight. I wasn't sleepy at all. I was terrified. It was got rid of my sleepiness, nothing else. But that, it seems somehow wrong. Same as like sometimes when you went to these monasteries trained, as when I was very young, it's supposed to be very tough. But it wasn't. People made it tough because it was stupid. You had to meditate, sitting on the ground. And somehow it was our pride, especially Western pride. I'm as good as anybody else. So, yeah, your knees were hurting. But you looked at these other people, they weren't moving, so I'm not going to move. And that was actually stupidity. You should have moved. My old wisdom was telling me, move. There's nothing wrong with that. Buddhism is supposed to be compassionate and kind. But because I believed, like fear, what other people would say about me, that is why I never followed my innate wisdom. And because of that, because I was following a tradition, the external traditions, not really understanding why, not really understanding my own mindful wisdom, that's why that I was very lucky to actually not get too hurt. Other people do get hurt. And that little research from Brown University in the United States, I didn't read it totally, just a quick summary of it, but in my experience as a teacher of meditation, and this is for many, many years, when I first taught meditation, I don't know if you know this anecdote, I was a school teacher in Devon in 1973, 74, I think 73. And, in those days, schools used to have assemblies. Those are my age. And it was my turn to do the assembly for 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I was a school teacher there. So I went up to the principal and I asked him, would you mind if, instead of just reading out some inspiring book or, I'm a Buddhist, why can't I teach meditation? He said, okay. He was a very good, very cool principal. Give it a try. So, for 5 days, morning assembly, 650 children, from 11-year-olds to 18-year-olds. And I told them, after the announcements, okay, I'm now going to teach you meditation. I want you all to put your hands on your lap and straighten your backs. I always remember that all these kids, just lounging over, sitting on the floor of the assembly hall, they all went straight. It was like the army. They actually followed. Close your eyes, and then just watch your breath go in, watch your breath go out, only for 5 minutes. And they all followed. Not one kid sort of messed around or started laughing. And after the 5 minutes, it's absolutely honest, 73, I think it was, they gave me applause afterwards. For the whole year I was at that school, no one else got applause after doing the morning assembly. I did. And some years ago, this, what happens, guy comes up and sort of says, oh, do you remember me? Please don't do that to me. And I'm going to Thailand tomorrow to teach a meditation retreat. And then in a couple of weeks' time to New York and Chicago and to Toronto. I meet so many people. How the heck can I remember you? Sometimes even the monks are... No, I don't. I remember the monks. What's your name anyway? Who are you over there, Mr. President? No. But anyway, he came out and said, I was one of those kids you taught meditation to. And he said, changed my whole life. It's wonderful when you do something, you totally forget who it was. A small thing in your mind, but it changes other people's lives. Thank you so much. But anyway, so I've taught meditation for such a long time. And you've noticed that people who actually do have any problems and trouble, it's always because they don't follow their heart. They don't follow what they think is right. They actually follow what they're told. They go by the book. And a lot of times they go, because of pride, controlling. It's the controlling stuff which causes the problems in meditation, and it's the controlling stuff which causes the problems with violence. What is violence anyway? It's just trying to control other people. Trying to sort of make them do this or make them do that. And so, why does that want to control? Because of fear. And because we're not really listening to our own heart. If you do listen to your own heart, and you're wise enough and experienced enough to actually know what to listen to, then it's very difficult to actually make any mistakes in meditation. It just doesn't feel right. You have to keep on sitting there when you realize, no, it's not the right time. I should get up and do something else. You realize that sometimes after the meditation period is over, you feel, no, it's not the right time to get up. I need to keep going on. Sometimes you feel it's the right thing to do, just to let go of the body and follow the breath or whatever else comes up. It's one of the things which is such a difficult thing for me to do, is actually to encourage people to let go of control and just to follow the heart. Use wisdom power, never willpower. And wisdom power is not learning power. It's not what you're told, it's what you feel right now. One of the reasons why beginning meditation with your posture. So many people keep saying, no, you've got to have a straight back to get deep meditation. That is total go-mayang. Remember last week I mentioned what go-mayang is? Go is ball, mayang was what comes out the back end of a ball. What is important is you feel it's comfortable. It's really good. If you're uncomfortable, in pain, if you can't relax your body, how can you relax your mind? You're just stressing your body, stressing your mind, and that's where problems come in meditation for people. Stressing themselves out, thinking they're going on the right path, trying too hard, trying to sort of get somewhere, instead of being kind. Kindness feels good. It feels right. Sometimes people say, oh, but if you're too kind, you never get anywhere. If you're too compassionate, you just let the world just slide down the slippery slope. If you don't act against those extremists and those terrorists and the people destroying the world, if we don't act against them, it will get worse. You all know the story of that teacher, I don't know and that's a doctor. I don't know if he's here today. I don't think he is. But he was the one who was going to resign after his first patient died. And I told him, look, you've got the whole idea wrong. Being a doctor is not about curing, it's about caring. If you want to cure people, you will fail many times. If you care, you never need to fail. It's a caring profession. If you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, if you're a monk, which is everything, I will never be able to cure you. Many of you fail. I've been trying for years and years and years and years and years. But I can always care for you. That I never need to be a failure on. And you find, surprise, 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 if you care for people, you cure many more. People who wouldn't get cured. But you make caring more important than curing. And people get better. You try and cure your husband of all his bad things. And many of your wives have been trying to do that for years. You will never succeed. You care for him, and then he cures himself. That's how it happens. Those, Venerable Samangalo, he's only just come to our monastery, but I was telling our president today, my biggest headache in Bodhinyana Monastery, down in Serpentine, we've got too many monks. And this is really weird. In just about every other Western country, even in places like Thailand and Sri Lanka, you don't have enough monks. There's temples and monasteries which are empty. And mine is bursting at the seams. And so, why? Because I don't ever try and cure my monks. I don't sort of, force them to meditate or try and get them to get deep in meditation. I care for them. And that's when they prosper. You've got, I don't mind saying this, Ajahn Brahm, he's coming Saturday and Sunday, he's become a really great teacher. A few other people, a few other of my babies, my kids, ones I've ordained and brought up, they're becoming really, really good monks now. Ajahn Brahm just got a message from some of the people. He's over in Indonesia, and many hardline Muslims have been going to his talks. Why? What are they doing going to see a Buddhist monk give a talk? Now you understand why. We're not trying to cure anybody. We're trying to care for them. That works. That is what stops extremism. Because the caring comes from the heart. The cure comes from the books, what you're supposed to be doing. It's coming from a totally different place. That's why it's really effective. And so that is actually how we meditate as well. Trying to cure. What do you mean by try and become enlightened? Try and cure your stupidity. Get rid of all your defilements. Get rid of your anger. Get it out now. That's called double anger. You're angry, and you're angry about being angry. And then you get angry about being angry about being angry, and it just goes, oh, crikey. Instead, we're kind. It's beautiful, opening the door of your heart totally to what's happening. So if we do that, we're not effective, we're not addressing the problem. We should be doing something. How about trying something different? Talking, because we went to another thing with one of the new ministers the other day, about the problem with so many people in prison. More and more and more, always building more and more prisons, more and more cells, always more overcrowded. What's going wrong? Trying to cure rather than care. So that caring comes from the heart, feels, rather than is afraid. The curing is also they need to be taught a lesson. Whoever it is, that's the philosophy of I think anyway, of extremists. These Western people need to be taught a lesson. Blow them up. That will teach them. Different ways that we express our anger. Revenge. Revenge only comes from when you want to cure things. It's one of the things you think will be an antidote, to the problems of this world. Someone really hurt me. They killed my child. Yeah, they'll go to jail for a few years, but I'll be suffering for the rest of my life. I see that in the newspapers a lot. Throw them in the cell. Throw the key away. What they did to me, it's unforgivable. Where that comes from is not from the heart. If you follow the heart can always forgive. It's such a beautiful choice. It is spiritual. It is holy. That's what religion's supposed to be about. Even in Islam, mercy. Buddhism, compassion. Christianity, to love your neighbour as yourself. You want to be forgiven. So why can't we forgive others? That takes fearlessness. It's an amazing thing, but it's something which doesn't get tried often enough. And when it does, it's powerful. Would you like to be forgiven? Really forgiven? That is holy. That comes from in here. From the head. Revenge. But To go from revenge, hurting other people, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that just keeps ophthalmologists, if I said that right, and dentists in more work. No, we forgive. The Gandhi principle. I can see 1,000 reasons, said Gandhi, for giving my life for a good cause. I can't see one reason for taking the life of another. That's inspiring. And there's only a way, you have to say that from the heart. You can't say that from the head. It doesn't make any sense. Halfway, anyway, I always tell people, if you're a Buddhist, the law of karma, you don't have to seek revenge on your ex or on anyone else who's hurt you, your boss. No need to seek revenge because karma will get the bastards anyway. And I say that word so you can remember it. Leave it up to karma. Your job is to forgive, to let it go. You have that choice. And if you think, well, they need to be sorted out, let karma do that. And that is actually coming from a much different place, which means that not only do we create a more peaceful world, but actually a world without so many problems. It's something which inspires others. Yeah, a few people will die, but less will. People will get hurt, but less. You try and cure things, that is too aggressive. Caring for things comes on a totally different level. And I always thought that is where religion should be coming from. That is where the holiness of spirituality lies. Never in the books. The books are secondary. The books, the scriptures are supposed to point you where the truth comes from. Where did that truth come from anyway? Where did those words in those holy books come from? They all came from people's hearts. Supposedly wise people who saw the truth, and where did they get that truth from? From inside of themselves. Put it in the book, and people just worship the book instead of following the advice of the book and going into the heart and feeling it for yourself. What's right and what's wrong in this world. That the precepts, they're the traffic lights. They just give you a good area to look at. But the real ethics and morality always come from the heart. Because if you follow precepts, rules, commandments, or whatever it is, you will always say, well, this is an exception. You say, no, I can't do this. This person deserves to be killed. What they did to me. And you're not caring anymore. Finish off with that famous word of the Buddha. So that that hatred never ceases with more hatred, with revenge. It only ends with love and forgiveness. It's a great word of the Buddha. He said it's an ancient law. It's not Buddhist. It's sort of law which is there no matter what religion you are. They hurt me. They beat me. They killed me. They blew up my friends and relations. If you want revenge, you're just part of continuing the cycle. If you can follow the heart and go to that wonderful next stage of caring, forgiving, letting it go, then you cure. Make caring most important. Then curing happens afterwards. And when you're meditating, you'll only get into problems and difficulties if you're trying to cure yourself, trying to improve yourself, trying to make yourself better, trying to get rid of all your difficulties and problems. And no, care for yourself. Don't try and cure yourself. You're good enough as you are. Care for yourself. Just the last little, I say this almost every week. You're a tree in the forest. All trees in the forest are bent and crooked. They've all got scars on them. I've never ever seen a tree in the forest which is perfectly straight with all the branches in the right place. I've never ever seen that. Not even in the botanical gardens, not even in Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, which has got so many workers on there trying to make it look perfect. No, every tree in the forest is bent and crooked and scarred. Just like every monk who comes to my monastery is always a handful. Every person who comes on the committee, every person who's a member of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia, either here or abroad, you're all bent, crooked and damaged wherever you are in this world. That's why you belong. This is your place. You're accepted. You're cared for. Just being respected and welcomed. You're okay. You're a friend, you're a member. Welcome. Just that much is such a powerful statement in a world where people are put down, excluded, stigmatized, told they're not good enough, saying there's something wrong with you. That is Gomayang. There's nothing wrong with you at all. Welcome to the forest. You belong. Thank you for listening. Very good. Okay, now we've got some questions from overseas. That's actually why I think this person who wrote this little letter to the editor really understood what Buddhism was. Okay, so we've got here. Okay, here we got Cassandra in Sweden, Paul in UK, and Kush in Cairns. Oh, we got nothing from Syria, nothing from ISIS. No. Can I tell an old ISIS joke before we start? I haven't told a joke yet. This guy in Sydney, I think I told this one before, maybe some of you remember, this guy in Sydney was just really just upset at how much it cost for his insurance. And the insurance company said if you want to get less premiums because of burglars and stuff, you have to install security screens on your windows. You get security guards like we've got outside. You have to have cameras everywhere, bars on your window. He said it's like living in a prison. But you have to, because there's burglars around. And he found an alternative. Now he doesn't pay any insurance. He's got free security. And all he needed to do, no bars on his windows, no security screens, no CCTV cameras. All he did, he went to Bunnings and bought a flagpole. And on the flagpole in his front garden, he put an ISIS flag. Now he's got 24/7 security, all for free, from ACO, CIA, federal police. And he doesn't have to pay a cent for it, it's all for free. They were watching him 24/7. Anyway, it's an old joke, but I couldn't resist it. I have panic attacks and nightmares when I meditate from a past trauma. I have tried to keep meditating, but it gets worse and worse. How should I be practicing? You get panic attack when I meditate from a past trauma. I don't know what you're meditating on, but usually what happens is if you're meditating, you're getting nice and peaceful, and the past trauma comes up, you do have a choice. Exercise that choice. If you don't think you're ready for it to come up, you just get up and do something else. But if you want to actually, if you feel strong enough, don't try and force it. Understand that it's a forcing. Care for that trauma. Open the door of your heart to it. Like I said, this is practiced here in a group. I keep saying about this group. You imagine, this is how it works. This is done professionally here. When you feel safe, if you don't feel safe, just get up and do something else. When you feel safe enough to do it, you imagine in your heart the little Valentine's Day heart with 2 doors in it. Imagine, visualize it, open up those doors. There inside of you is the person who wasn't traumatized. The person, who you can live with, respect, had lots of joy with. And you look down from in your own heart, you see outside is that woman who was traumatized, who was raped, abused, beaten, treated so badly. You see that little girl outside. Problem is, they're outside and you're inside. You're afraid of them. They have been stigmatized. They have been excluded. So what you do is you imagine this little staircase coming down from your heart. And then you invite that little girl up. The girl who was hurt so badly. Come in, you're part of me. You're who I am. I'm not going to try and get rid of you. That was the problem. I'm not going to try and cure you, I'm going to care for you. Come up. That takes a huge amount of courage, the lack of fear. When they come up those stairs, trembling, terrified, you as well. The one up the top, the one up the bottom. Hugs. You're who I am, you're part of me. I'm a damaged tree, just like every other tree. That's who I am. I'm not going to try and straighten myself up. That's a very cathartic moment. That's when you really do dig in the shit and you become the beautiful, sweet mango tree. With acceptance, caring, not curing. So that means the attacks and nightmares don't come anymore. You've resolved. It's part of you. Who you are. And it makes you, honestly, a much more beautiful person. Richer. Next question from UK. If Buddhism is about leaving the world rather than prestige or status, then why was the question of nuns' ordination so important? They were able to practice anyway beforehand. I met some nuns in the UK and they were content with their status even though they weren't considered equal as monks officially. That was just like, why do we have to give marriage equality to the gays? They can live quite okay. What's the problem there? If you're a gay, then you know what the problem is. A gay who's in love and you want to get married. So if you're a woman and you want to become a fully ordained nun, then you'll understand what the problem is when they say, no, you can't. For that bhikkhuni ordination, it wasn't my choice, I wasn't on a crusade. It was just because there were 4 excellent candidates, women here in Perth, people like Ajahn Brahm, who'd been a nun for such a long time, Venerable Seri, Hasapanya and Nirodha, and they came up and asked, can we be bhikkhunis? I didn't have the right to say no. I took the blame, but it was their fault. That is what happened. It's not prestige, it's kindness. And this was Paul in the UK, so you're not a woman, obviously, I think, because sometimes the names are very difficult these days. But, so maybe you don't understand what it would be like to be a Buddhist, to be a woman, and to want to have the full ordination, but it's denied. And people say, oh, what do you need it for? You don't need it. You can still practice. That's not the point. If they want it, they should have it. It's up to them. I don't like people telling others what they should do. And in Cairns, why does our mind tend to stick to negative states of mind like ill will and desires? What should one do when one feels a storm of emotions? When you find a storm of emotions is something which I wrote about called the Nalagiri strategy. This comes from a story when somebody tried to assassinate the Buddha. And what they did was imagine, long time ago, narrow streets. If you go to Europe, the old towns, the streets are always narrow. Just needed horses, that's all. Not big cars and trucks like we have these days. So this was in one of those, it's in Rajagaha, like some time ago. And this person wanted to kill the Buddha. So how can you kill the Buddha? So what they did, there was an elephant. And I think Drug Dog gave it alcohol, the elephant, and stepped the elephant on loose along the narrow roads where the Buddha was coming on arms round. And so there was this bad elephant charging around, bashing everybody, squashing everything. And all the people went, look out, a wild elephant is coming. Buddha, just get out of the way quickly. And the Buddha was come with many monks. All of them scarpered, ran for their lives, except for Ananda. Ananda was the Buddha's attendant, who loved the Buddha, who would do anything for the Buddha. So stood in front of the Buddha. Let the elephant kill me. I will save my master. Just as you would do, wouldn't you, Sumangala? I'm not so sure. But anyhow, the Buddha just pushed him out of the way. A very nice gesture, but I can look after this myself. And so there was the compassionate, peaceful, non-violent Buddha walking so calmly. And the wild elephant smashing everything, charging, beating everything at full speed. And they were going to come together and there's no way out for either of them. What would happen next? Now, as I usually tell the story, I've got no doubt at all the Buddha had these magical powers. The Buddha could have, Bruce Lee could do this, the Buddha could do much more than that. Grab the elephant by the trunk, quickly, and before the elephant knew what was going on, swirling him 3 times around the head and throwing him over the Ganges River about 300 miles away. That'd be easy for a Buddha. But that's violence. That's not how Buddhas work. So what the Buddha did, this is my story. It's not actually quite the same as the text, but basically the same. Yeah, okay, I admit it. There, the wild elephant coming. And the Buddha gave this beautiful loving kindness. What does that mean? The Buddha was saying, Nalagiri elephant, you can squash me if you want to. You can pick me up with your strong trunk and smash all my bones against the tree. Whatever you do, great elephant, the door of my heart will always be open to you. I'll always love you and care for you and forgive you, even if you kill me. No real loving kindness, just like your traumatized person you actually allow to come in. I love you. You're part of me. I care for you. I accept you. I embrace you. The door of my heart's open to you, Nalagiri, even if you're going to murder me, painfully. And at that, if it really is sincere, coming from a very strong place, like those traumatized people tell me, it works. Nalagiri just stopped, lowered his head, and the Buddha, this was in the story, started stroking his trunk. There, Nalagiri, there, it's okay. It's all right. The power of loving kindness, when it's pure, when it comes from the right place, not asking for anything, but opening the door of your heart to what's happening, is incredibly powerful. Much more powerful than any willpower. I call that Nalagiri strategy. If you have a storm of emotions, the door of my heart is open to all of those emotions. You can kill me, you can drive me crazy, but I will accept you, embrace you. Thank you for being here. The door of my heart, unconditionally open. That totally undermines the emotions. It pulls a rug out from underneath them. They can't stand that. And just like Nalagiri, your crazy mind will be bending in front of you. There, crazy mind. There, it's okay. We all go crazy sometimes. It's all right. That's how we deal with it. Full on, it works. Otherwise, you just get more and more crazy. So, that is how you meditate. That is when you don't get problems. You try and run away from the crazy mind, try and control it. You're fighting something you can never win. Thereby, you get frustrated, anger, and you do violence to yourself and others. That is not the Buddhist way. Okay, so there we go, 9 o'clock. So we now pay respects to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And please, not too many questions this afternoon. I've got to go to Thailand, early morning flight tomorrow morning. I'll be up at 3:30 a.m. So please let me have some sleep. Please, kind. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suwakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamma Buddhang namassami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang namami.